Hello class, you've just finished round 1 and round 2 is due very soon. You could always click on View Processing Schedule on the company page to see when the rounds are due. And this will give you the date and times that the rounds are due. Now, the first thing you should do after completing round 1 is check your overview score. So you go in and you'll have Y-0 stands for year 0 or round 0. So you didn't own the company at this point. You took over in Y-1, which stands for year 1 or round 1. And we want to see what improvements does your team make over the previous year's management. So last year's management, year 0, it was not you. Your year or Y-1. So this is your results. So you want to see your revenues per share of stock. It increased from $12 to $22. So you did a YOY, which is business terms for year over year, an 85% increase in your year over year revenues per share. So you earn 1 point for every point of percentile increase. So as we go down, as we look at all of the major financial and management ratios, if you increase profit margins, so here profit margins went from 40% to 58%, a 45% increase in gross profit margins, a 70% increase in operational profit margins, and a 73% increase in net profit margins. Asset turnover was, the total asset turnover went down by 9%, so you lost 9 points. This happens when you buy a lot of assets like factories and operational investments. This may increase your assets faster than your profits, and this will result, and that's okay, because you can't be a winner in every category of financial ratio for every round. Sometimes some financial ratios have to be sacrificed to increase others. Okay, so as you go down the list, you check over all of your major categories here. And then you see at the bottom, if you make operational investments, if you make double your operational investments, you earn 100 points. So it's important to make those operational investments. And if you have a surplus of cash, that's also earns you 100 points. So you don't want to have a deficit because you could lose 100 points. So it's really like giving up 200 points. Instead of earning 100, you lose 100. That's like losing 200 points. So my total score here is 1,078 points, which is very good. Now, the first round is the easiest round to make points because you're coming off an inept, failed management team that was fired and you took over. Moving forward, you're going to be competing against your results. So in year 2, you're going to be competing against your year 1 results, and it gets a little bit harder to beat yourself each round. So don't expect to earn 1,000 points per round. It does become more difficult. And as rounds 2 and 3 are very difficult because you're building the company, it's even harder to get a vast amount of points. But if you build the company correctly in round 2 and 3, then you should get more points in 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so once you're done digesting your points, you want to go to assessment. And on the assessment tab, there are 3 ways to figure out how well you did. Excuse me. 1, you have stars from 1 to 5. So here I earned 4 out of 5 stars. So that's an above average performance. I beat 68%. This is a percentile rank, which means I beat 68% of the past 5,000 teams that have played the simulation, and my score is 22. I can click here for some advice on how to improve this score moving forward. So if I scroll down, I'll see here on total asset turnover, I only have 2 of 5 stars. So I performed low in total asset turnover because I may have purchased a lot more assets than the profits I developed. So I was willing, as I'm building the company, I'm willing to increase assets quickly in the beginning, and I'll benefit that in my return assets will go up later in the later rounds. After you've finished reviewing your assessment, so this gives you an idea of how well you did in the simulation compared to your peers. Now you can go to charts, and in the charts area, you'll get a leaderboard of how all the teams in the competition did that round, so you can see how you size up compared to everybody else, whether you're at the top or bottom of the list. I would suggest reviewing all these charts, but specifically, industry chart is very good, but also team performance chart is critical, because you want to click on this chart And if you go to the very bottom, you're going to see something called market potential versus actual. So the yellow is my sales. So I sold 2,000 economy vehicles. The potential was to sell 2,069. So I gave up 69 cars to another competitor because I didn't forecast high enough. Here in sedan, the potential in the actual sales in the yellow was 2238. So I met all of my potential. But that might mean that I had some unsold cars. I may have produced too much. So this is an important chart to review to check how your sales forecasting is performing. And remember, to do well in the sales forecasting, you need to read the student manual, which gives you guidelines on how to forecast and the growth percentages of the industry. Okay, moving into the industry. Now, and here is where I could check out all the other companies in the competition. What were their decisions last year, and how well did they do in their financial metrics, their points, their profits, and how did they build their cars? What were their specifics, and what was their costs, and what was their market potential demand, and how many sales units they have. Some students will email and say, this is unrealistic that I get all this information about all these companies from their last year's. Seems unrealistic. Well, in the real world, when companies are public companies, you can easily look up how they design their vehicles, go to any dealership, and the company's annual report will tell you all their financial performance for that year. So it is very realistic. Moving towards your financials, this is a full backup of your income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statements to review. And now you start into year 2. So in year 2, which is Y-2, or sometimes I call it round 2, we now have to redesign the cars for next year. Just like real car companies come out with new models of their cars every year, so do we. So the economy class, I'm going to look at my decisions from last year when I'm thinking about my decisions for year 2. And I'm also going to notice that the customer expectation ranges have increased. The importance factors have remained the same. So I'm going to try to make my cars a little bit better to reflect that my customers are expecting more. And then I'm going to reprice the vehicle. And I see that I was able to increase my profit margin, which is very important. You started out the game at a 40% profit margin. So if your profit margins weren't above 40% last round, you really let down your investors and the owners of the company and the management on all the employees. You really failed the company. So in order not to fail the company, gross profit margins always have to be higher every year. That's the goal of a company, to maximize shareholder wealth. And the way to maximize shareholder wealth is increase gross profits. Now my sales forecast. I forecasted 2,000 vehicles and I sold 2,000 vehicles. But I'm not sure if that forecast was accurate. One thing I should check is the student manual. So I can call up the student manual and I can look at the sales portion. And it tells me that economy will grow 25% per year, and that in year 2, the average amount of models sold would be about 2,734 cars. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to try to put in 2,700 vehicles will be my new forecast, because I don't think my cars are as good to really be at the top range of the forecast, so I'm going to enter that in. I'm going to do the same thing for sedan. And you notice here that I have these operational cost reductions. So I'm getting a $1,200 reduction. So if something costs me $1,800 to make the car, I'm only paying $600 because of this cost reduction from the operational investments page. So here I'm going to redesign the vehicle. And I get these warnings if I make something too low as far as the specifications have to meet a certain minimum. Although I can exceed customer expectations or go below customer expectations, if I do go too far, the simulation will warn me. And I see here that I did increase my profit margins. And again, I'm going to go to the student user manual and see that sedan should sell at least 3,300 vehicles. So I'm just going to put 3,000 in right now. And I see that I forecasted 2,500 last year, but I only sold 2,200, which means I might have some extra cars in inventory. So maybe I'll increase this by 100 vehicles because I have that inventory there. All right, so moving into truck, I'm going to redesign the truck. Try to make the truck more marketable. And I see here that I did not really increase my profit margins as much. So I might think about let's see. Lowered some, okay, so I got it up to 60%, so there's an increase. And if I go to the student manual, about 21, so I'll say 2,000. Now, you want to increase your profit margins as much as you can. And I had a huge increase. Last round, my profit margin went from 40 to 58%. And since I did so well in round one, it's making it difficult to compete against myself in round two. But as long as my profit margins are increasing, I'm feeling comfortable with that. Okay, so let's see the same thing with, and again, I have a similar problem here. Let's see the 422, so I'll say 2,000. And I'm going to have to try and, there we go. Okay. All right. So I got it up about 2%, and I have my forecast. I'm going to submit my sales data, and I'm going to work on my marketing page. So I'm going to just, it takes a little bit of a while to put my marketing information in, but again, the range which is expected for this is somewhere between $1 million to $1.5 million to be spent in advertising. I can spend, of course, above or below that, but I have to break this up into the different categories. And again, using the student user guide, it tells me which categories are most important. It looks like television and newspapers seem to be pretty important. So I'm going to work on that, and then I'll pause and come back to production. Now I'm in production here. And I see that I need to make 2,700 vehicles, so I'm going to have to buy a new production plant. I know that some students bought 5 production plants. This is ridiculous. Why would you buy more production plants than you need? This gives me the capacity to make 7,000 vehicles. I only need to build 2,700. All those other factories will be left idle, doing nothing. So if I left off owning 2 production facilities, I only need to buy 1 additional to meet my production needs. So I don't want to bring on much more capacity than I need. Now I'm going to increase my operational investments. This will help for me to maintain my profit margins by lowering my production costs, and that way I could build a car that would have higher profit margins. So that's critical to doing well. So here in Sedan, I only need to build, I'm going to use this shortage number. I'm going to try to meet this 2834. So I don't need to build a new production plant here because I had some leftover inventory that I could repurpose for this year. And again, I'm going to put some money into operational investments. And again, here I don't need to build a new production plant, so I won't. I'll only build the production plants when I need them, so I don't increase my assets too quickly without utilizing them to sell vehicles. And the same thing here. I have 2 plants. I only need to make 1959 cars, so I don't need to build a new production plant, but I will invest in the company. Okay, and then complete my production. And now in the financial page, I'm going to go to the bottom real quick and see that I have a nice surplus here. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm just going to retire some stock. Oops, that's too much. Okay, so I'm going to retire some shares of stock. Okay, so I'm going to retire some stock, and maybe I will keep my debts for right now. So I still have $11 million surplus. I would suggest anywhere between $11 to $20 million surplus. just to ward off or protect yourself against a deficit. So if you find yourself running deficits in the company, build up bigger and bigger cash surpluses to protect yourself against that. Okay, so I'm going to complete year 2. So now my decisions for year 2 have been completed. I can always go back in and review and change them up until the processing. And it says here that the round is going to process in 2 days. So I got the work done. I didn't wait till the last minute. So this has been my quick video to show you how to review your results from round 1 and some ideas and concepts on how to improve your results moving into round 2 for the simulation. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope that you perform well on the next round. And after the next round, I'll do more of a review of overall of how the teams in the class did and the charts for the class in the next video. Thank you for your time and good luck.